I discovered my sister's hidden past, and it shattered our family Reddit stories. It was a quiet, ordinary afternoon in a little town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Yet, the Donovan family remained somewhat of an enigma, despite their proximity to the other households. Nestled in a modest home at the edge of town, the Donovans presented themselves as the quintessential perfect family. Two loving parents, a teenage son, and a young daughter. But like many outwardly idyllic family portraits, something sinister was lurking beneath the surface. Ellen, the matriarch of the Donovan family, was a woman of elegance and grace. She carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who was both loved and respected by all who knew her. Her husband, Michael, was the embodiment of a hardworking, reliable father figure. Always at the helm of family activities, his attention to detail and meticulous planning made him a figure of authority within the house. They had managed to build a reputation as a couple who had everything together. A beautiful house, two wonderful children, and the kind of harmony that seemed almost too perfect to be true. Their children, Ryan and Lucy, were the light of their lives. Ryan, at 17, was on the cusp of adulthood. He was smart, confident, and liked by his peers. He had recently begun to take an interest in his father's business, a family-run construction company that Michael had spent years growing into a local powerhouse. Lucy, at 10, was the epitome of innocence. Curious, bright-eyed, and overflowing with questions about the world. She idolized her older brother, following him around the house with a sense of awe that only a younger sibling could possess. Yet, what the people in town didn't know was that the Donovans were far from perfect. Their lives, hidden behind the white picket fence and the perfectly manicured lawn, were haunted by secrets and lies. Ellen's past, buried deep beneath layers of carefully constructed personas, had a shadow that threatened to emerge at any given moment. And Michael, the ever-present figure of authority, was not as steadfast as he seemed. In truth, he was hiding his own demons, ones that had been festering for years, always just out of sight but never far enough to forget. The truth was, the Donovan family had been keeping a secret for a long time. The kind of secret that, if revealed, could shatter everything they had worked so hard to build. Ryan had always known that something wasn't quite right. It was the small things. The way his parents would look at each other when they thought he wasn't paying attention, the hushed conversations that would stop the moment he walked into a room. There were moments when his father's temper would flare unexpectedly, and his mother's calm facade would crack, only to be quickly masked by a strained smile. Ryan never understood these flashes of tension, but they left an imprint on him. And then there was the night that everything changed. It was a rainy Thursday evening when it happened. The storm had knocked out the power, plunging the house into an eerie silence. Ryan was in his room, reading a book, when he heard his parents arguing downstairs. The voices were low at first, almost inaudible, but then they escalated, and he could make out words now. He froze, listening intently. "Why are you doing this now, Michael?" Ellen's voice trembled, but it was sharp, filled with something Ryan had never heard before. "We agreed this was for the best. Why are you threatening to ruin it all?" "Because it's not right." "Ellen?" Michael's voice boomed with anger. "You can't keep pretending like nothing happened. I won't let you keep this from me anymore." The conversation was jarring, but what shocked Ryan the most was not the anger in his father's voice. It was the raw emotion that his mother had never shown before. He had never seen her cry, let alone hear her speak like this. Ryan sat still, his heart pounding in his chest as he tried to make sense of what was happening. His mother's voice, barely a whisper now, drifted up the stairs. "I never wanted this to happen." Ellen's voice broke, and for the first time, Ryan heard her vulnerability. "But you don't understand." The rest of the conversation was lost as Ryan crept out of his room and cautiously descended the stairs. His parents' voices were still audible, but their words were too muffled for him to make out any longer. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he saw them. standing in the kitchen, facing each other, with a look of complete exhaustion on their faces. "Mom." "Dad." Ryan's voice was tentative, uncertain. He had never interrupted their arguments before, but something inside him told him that he had to now. Ellen wiped her eyes quickly, attempting to regain composure as she turned to face him. "Ryan, what are you doing up? You should be in bed." "We need to talk," Michael said, his voice tight. "Come sit down." Ryan's heart raced as he hesitated for a moment. There was an unsettling sense of finality in his father's words. He knew instinctively that whatever they were about to say would change everything. When he sat down, Michael cleared his throat and looked at Ellen. The tension between them was palpable, but Ellen nodded, and Michael began to speak. "Son, there's something you need to know," he said, his tone soft yet firm. "It's about our past, your mother's past. Something that has been hidden from you, from everyone, for a long time." Ryan felt a shiver run down his spine. He had a sudden, terrible feeling that he wasn't ready for the truth. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the pieces that were starting to fall into place, but he could not bring himself to ask what was coming. He waited, holding his breath, unsure of how to react. "It's about your sister," Michael continued, his voice faltering as he spoke. "Lucy, she's not your real sister." The words hung in the air like an electric current, their weight settling on Ryan's chest. He could feel his throat tighten, his mind scrambling to process what had just been said. His heart raced, and the room seemed to spin as his father's words echoed in his mind. "She's adopted," Ellen said quietly, her face pale. "We didn't want you to know. We were trying to protect you. But now it's time." Ryan stared at his parents in shock, his mind numb. He couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. His sister, the one he had grown up with, the one he had shared every moment of his childhood with, wasn't really his sister. The revelation shattered the very foundation of his reality. As the truth unraveled before him, Ryan found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, confusion, betrayal, and a growing sense of disbelief. He didn't know how to feel, and more importantly, he didn't know how to navigate this new reality. It was clear that his family was no longer what he had always believed it to be. But there was more, much more, that his parents had yet to reveal. And with each passing day, the walls that held the secrets of the Donovan family were starting to crack, threatening to crumble under the weight of the truth. The days following that stormy night felt like a blur to Ryan. He walked around the house, feeling like a stranger in his own skin. Everything seemed the same on the surface. The well-maintained furniture, the smell of freshly baked bread from the kitchen, his sister Lucy laughing in the background. But the truth lingered in the air like an unspoken shadow. His mind raced, turning over every interaction, every smile, every conversation he had ever shared with Lucy. Was it all a lie? The idea that his parents had kept this from him for so long felt like a betrayal, an insidious kind of deception that he couldn't even begin to process. He wanted to ask questions, to scream at them for not telling him sooner. But there was something in his father's eyes that held him back. Michael had been so firm, so calm in his delivery of the truth. It was as though he had known that Ryan was going to need time to come to terms with it. The feeling of uncertainty gnawed at him, and he couldn't escape the feeling that there was more to the story, something deeper, darker, and far more complicated than what he had been told. That night, after his parents had gone to bed, Ryan found himself lying wide awake in his room. The darkness outside pressed against the windows, and the moonlight cast long shadows across his walls. He kept replaying his father's words over and over in his mind. "Lucy, she's not your real sister." It was like a broken record, and every time he thought about it, his heart would clench with a mixture of disbelief and confusion. But then something shifted in his mind. He thought about how close he had always been with Lucy, how they had fought and laughed together, how they had shared so many memories. She had been his sister, his family, for as long as he could remember. The love he felt for her was real, and he couldn't simply erase it because of a label that now seemed meaningless. Still, the question gnawed at him. Why had they kept this from him? Why hadn't they told him the truth sooner? Ryan knew that he needed answers, and he knew that he couldn't keep avoiding the questions. The silence in the house felt suffocating, and he couldn't wait much longer to confront his parents. The following morning, as the sun began to rise and cast a soft golden light over the house, Ryan decided it was time. He couldn't live in this fog any longer. He needed to know everything. He had to face his parents and demand the truth, no matter how painful it would be. With a sense of resolve, he walked downstairs to the kitchen, where Ellen was preparing breakfast. She looked up as he entered, her face softening with a hesitant smile. Ryan's stomach twisted, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. He had always been close to his mother, the bond between them deep and unspoken. But now, that bond felt like it was fraying at the edges. "Morning, Ryan," she said, her voice carrying a faint trace of worry. "How are you feeling?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. He stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. His eyes searched her face, looking for any sign that she knew what he was about to say. "Mom, I need to know everything," he said quietly. "About Lucy. About what you and Dad didn't tell me. I can't keep pretending I don't know." Ellen's expression shifted, the calm facade she had worn so well starting to crack. She set the spoon down and wiped her hands on a towel, then motioned for him to sit. She pulled out a chair across from her, and he reluctantly took his place. "Ryan," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't want to tell you. Your father, and I thought it was better for you to grow up with her as your sister, without complicating things. We didn't want to hurt you. We didn't want you to feel like your whole world was changing." Ryan's breath hitched in his throat. "But it has changed, Mom," he said, his voice catching in his chest. "You told me she wasn't my real sister, but she is my sister. I love her. I always have." Ellen's eyes welled up with tears as she looked at her son. "I know, and I never meant for you to feel like that wasn't real. Your bond with Lucy is real, Ryan. That's the one thing that hasn't changed. But we kept her adoption from you because, well, because of the way she came into our lives." Ryan frowned, the confusion deepening. "What do you mean? What's so bad about the way she came into our lives?" Ellen hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the table as she took a long, slow breath. "It wasn't just an adoption, Ryan. It was a situation that your father and I never talked about with anyone. We didn't want it to define our family. But now, you need to know. And Lucy needs to know, too." Ryan's heart began to race again, a sense of dread settling in his chest. "What situation? Please, just tell me." Ellen closed her eyes, as if steeling herself for what she was about to say. "When I was younger, I made some decisions that I deeply regret. I wasn't the person I am now. I was involved in something I shouldn't have been, and Lucy was a part of that. She wasn't just adopted. She was a child of a situation that your father and I felt we couldn't explain back then." Ryan's mind spun as he processed her words. "What are you talking about? What situation? What's so bad about Lucy being adopted?" At Ellen's voice faltered. "Your sister. She's not just a child we took in. She's the result of something I did years ago. Something that was wrong. Something that we were both ashamed of. When we adopted her, we were hoping that she could have a new life, away from the mistakes of the past." While Ryan's head was spinning, his world was falling apart around him. His mother, the woman he had always seen as his rock, had a past that was darker than he had ever imagined. He had no idea what to do with this new information. "She's not just adopted," Ellen repeated, her voice breaking. "She's the result of something that wasn't supposed to happen. And we never told you because we didn't want you to see her differently. We didn't want you to feel like your family was tainted." Ryan stood up abruptly, his mind racing. "I need to talk to Dad. I need to hear this from him too." Ellen nodded, her face pale and strained. "He's downstairs. He's waiting for you." Ryan left the kitchen, his feet heavy as he made his way to the basement. His father was sitting at his desk, sorting through paperwork, his back turned to Ryan as he entered. "Dad." Ryan's voice was sharp, and the weight of the words he was about to say felt almost unbearable. Michael turned, his expression unreadable. "Ryan," he said, his voice calm but laced with tension. "Sit down, we need to talk." Ryan sat, his mind reeling. He didn't know how to ask the questions that were swirling in his head. He didn't know how to make sense of it all. But he had to try. "I need to know everything, Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "About Lucy, about the past, about the truth." Michael's eyes softened, and he sighed deeply as though he had been waiting for this moment. "You've grown up believing that Lucy was your sister, and that's the truth, Ryan. But there's more to it. And it's something I wish I could have shielded you from. It's a part of our past that we've kept buried. But it's time you knew." The weight of the words hung heavily in the room, and Ryan braced himself for whatever was coming next. What his parents were about to reveal would change everything he had ever known about his family. The secrets they had kept for so long were finally being dragged into the light, and Ryan wasn't sure if he was ready for the truth, or if anyone ever truly could be. The basement was silent, except for the faint hum of the old furnace in the corner. Ryan sat, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, staring at his father, Michael, who sat across from him. His father's face was etched with the kind of solemnity Ryan had rarely seen. It was the same expression Michael wore when things were too difficult to confront, too painful to speak about. Ryan felt a knot in his stomach. He had never seen his father look so broken. "Dad." Ryan's voice cracked, his nerves fraying at the edges. "What's the real story? What did you mean when you said Lucy isn't just adopted? You said there's more to it." "But..." Michael exhaled sharply, his hands resting on the desk in front of him. He took a long, steadying breath before meeting Ryan's eyes. For a moment, it felt like the room itself had closed in on them, trapping them in this suffocating moment of truth. "There's more to Lucy's past than you think. Much more than we ever told you. And it's something I wish we didn't have to revisit." Ryan felt his heart sink deeper. He knew, instinctively, that this was going to be far worse than he had ever imagined. His parents had hidden something monumental, something that had lingered like a dark cloud over their family for years. "Tell me everything, Dad," Ryan pleaded. His voice was raw, and the silence in the room was overwhelming. "I can't take this any longer. I need to know the truth. All of it." But Michael hesitated, his eyes falling to the floor before he spoke again, his voice heavy with regret. "Lucy wasn't just adopted out of love. She was given up by her biological mother when she was just a baby. But it wasn't because of anything simple. It was because of the circumstances surrounding her birth that made everything so complicated." Ryan's confusion deepened. "What kind of circumstances? What happened to her mom?" Michael leaned forward, his face drawn. "Her biological mother, Sarah. She was a part of a group involved in illegal activities. And Lucy was born out of something that was more than just a mistake. It was a consequence of something much darker. Sarah was part of a human trafficking ring. When she became pregnant with Lucy, she was under pressure to keep the pregnancy a secret." Ryan's mind raced, his body frozen in disbelief. Human trafficking. The words felt like a punch to the gut. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Everything he thought he knew about his sister, his family, seemed to crumble away, piece by piece. He could feel his stomach churn with nausea. "Are you saying Lucy's mother was part of a crime syndicate?" Ryan whispered, his voice thick with shock. Michael nodded, his face grim. "Yes. Sarah was caught in a web of forced labor and trafficking. She was coerced into participating in the ring. When she found out she was pregnant, she didn't know what to do. She knew she couldn't raise Lucy in the environment she was in. So, she made the decision to leave. She disappeared, leaving Lucy behind. And that's where your mother and I stepped in. Ryan felt as if the floor beneath him had been ripped away. His sister, the girl he had always known as his own flesh and blood, had come from a place he couldn't even begin to understand. He had spent years growing up with her, laughing with her, fighting with her, sharing everything that made their childhood special. And yet all of it felt like a lie now. Your mother and I weren't in a position to have our own children at the time. We tried, Ryan. But after several miscarriages, we decided to look into adoption. When we learned about Lucy's situation, we were heartbroken. She was just a baby, abandoned in the worst of circumstances. We couldn't stand the thought of her growing up in a system that would only continue the cycle of pain. So, we made the decision to adopt her, and we promised ourselves that we would never tell you the truth. We wanted to give her a chance at a normal life. Away from all of that. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. It didn't make sense. His sister, Lucy, who had always been a symbol of innocence and joy, had come from the very darkness that the world around them had tried to hide. How could they have lived in this bubble of a perfect family, unaware of the monster lurking just beneath the surface? I don't know what to say, Ryan whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. I don't know what to think. This is too much. I thought I knew everything about my family, and now it feels like I never really knew anything at all. Michael stood up slowly, his movements heavy with the weight of his own guilt. I know, son. I know. But we never wanted this to be part of your life. We didn't want you to see Lucy differently. She's your sister, Ryan, no matter where she came from. You've loved her and she's loved you. That's what matters. Ryan couldn't speak. His mind was racing too fast for him to keep up. He stood up, pacing back and forth, trying to process what his father had just revealed. Lucy wasn't just adopted. She had been given up by a woman who was part of a horrific crime syndicate. She had come from a place of darkness, a place that no child should ever have to know. And yet she was still his sister. The thought brought a surge of emotions, and Ryan felt a deep sense of conflict. He had always seen her as his sister, loved her like a sister. But now, knowing the truth, knowing where she came from, how could he reconcile that with the life they had built together? Dad, Ryan said finally, his voice low and trembling. What happens now? How do we deal with this? How do we face Lucy with this new truth? Michael sat back down, his face etched with sadness. I don't know, Ryan. We've tried to shield her from the past for so long. She doesn't remember anything about her birth mother, and I think she's better off that way. But now that you know, we have to figure out how to tell her. And it's not going to be easy. It's never been easy. Ryan ran a hand over his face. I can't believe this. I don't know if I can look at her the same way. She's still my sister, but everything's different now. Look, Ryan, Michael said softly, standing up again. I'm not asking you to forget what you've learned. But don't let it define your relationship with her. She didn't choose any of this. She's just a little girl who's been through enough pain already. It's up to you whether you let this truth bring you closer or tear you apart. Ryan's heart ached as he thought about Lucy. The little girl he had always protected. The one he had always looked out for. How would she handle this? Would she hate him for knowing the truth? Would she understand that he still loved her, that nothing about their bond had changed? As the day wore on, Ryan found himself lost in thought. He knew he had to face Lucy, to tell her the truth, but the fear of what that would do to their relationship consumed him. Would she see him differently? Would their childhood memories now be tainted by the knowledge of where she had come from? Later that evening, as the family sat down to dinner, there was a palpable tension in the air. Lucy sat at the table, blissfully unaware of the storm that had been unleashed. She was laughing, telling stories about her day, her eyes sparkling with innocence. Ryan watched her, the image of her carefree spirit gnawing at his conscience. How could he possibly break this to her? Ryan. Lucy's voice broke through his thoughts. You're awfully quiet tonight. Is everything okay? He looked at her, seeing her for what she truly was. A young girl who had been through enough pain already, but who still carried with her the hope and innocence of someone who didn't know how dark the world could be. Yeah, Ryan said, forcing a smile. Everything's fine. But deep inside, Ryan knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The secrets that had shaped their family for years had come to light, and nothing could erase the truth. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and confusion. Ryan found himself walking through the house like a ghost, constantly battling the swirl of emotions that seemed to flood him at every turn. The weight of the truth was still heavy on his chest, suffocating in its intensity. No matter how hard he tried to push it away, the reality of Lucy's past hovered over every moment, casting a shadow that he couldn't escape. Each time he looked at her, his heart twisted with conflicting emotions. She was still the little sister he had always known, the one he had shared countless memories with. But now, knowing the truth about her origins, it felt like everything he had known about their relationship had been irreversibly altered. How could he reconcile the Lucy he had always known with the truth of her birth? How could he look at her and not think about the darkness from which she had come? At night, Ryan found himself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. His mind refused to quiet down, replaying every conversation, every moment with Lucy. He remembered their childhood, playing in the backyard, running through the woods, fighting over petty things, and then making up like nothing had ever happened. He remembered the way she would curl up next to him on the couch, seeking his protection when she had nightmares. He remembered how she had trusted him with every little detail of her life, how she had always looked to him for reassurance. But now, the trust between them felt fragile, like it could break at any moment. The truth had come crashing down on them, and Ryan wasn't sure if he could put the pieces back together. Lucy, for her part, seemed to be completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. She continued on with her days as though nothing had changed. She laughed, she joked. She asked questions about the world, just like she always had. But Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking on a tightrope, completely oblivious to the fact that everything around her was shifting. One evening, after dinner, Ryan found himself alone with her in the living room. His parents had gone out for a while, leaving them in the quiet of the house. Lucy was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine, humming to herself. She was so carefree, so innocent, and it made Ryan's heart ache even more. How could he tell her? How could he possibly explain the truth of her origins without shattering her sense of self? "Hey, Lou," Ryan said, his voice hoarse as he sat down beside her. Lucy looked up, her blue eyes sparkling. You're being quiet tonight. What's up?" Ryan swallowed, his throat dry. He hadn't expected it to be this hard. How do you break a child's world, especially when that child is the one you've always loved and protected? We need to talk," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Lucy frowned, setting the magazine down. "Talk about what?" Ryan hesitated. He knew that he couldn't delay this any longer. It had to be now. The secret couldn't stay buried, not when it affected them both. About where you came from. About who you really are." Lucy's face scrunched up in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I'm Lucy, your sister." But Ryan nodded, his chest tightening. "Yeah, you are. But there's more to it. There's a lot more." For a moment, Lucy just stared at him, her eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to decipher his words. "What are you talking about, Ryan? You're scaring me?" Ryan felt his heart break all over again. He had never wanted to scare her. He had never wanted to hurt her. But now, he was standing on the edge, and there was no way back. "Mom and Dad, they haven't told you everything about your past," Ryan continued, trying to keep his voice steady. There's something they've kept from you? Something important." But Lucy's face softened with concern. "What?" Why would they keep something from me? Ryan shook his head, not knowing how to explain it in a way that wouldn't destroy her. I don't know, Lou. I don't know why they did it, but they wanted to protect you, I guess. They didn't want you to know the truth about your birth mom. The mention of her biological mother made Lucy flinch. She had always known that she had been adopted, but her biological mother had never been something she had given much thought to. Ryan could see her mind racing, trying to make sense of his words. What do you mean? Lucy asked, her voice small, almost fearful. What about her? Ryan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Your birth mom? She wasn't in a good place when she had you. She was involved in some really bad things. Your mom, our mom, she adopted you because she wanted to give you a better life. But your biological mom, she was involved in something dangerous. Lucy's eyes grew wide, and she pulled back slightly, her small hands gripping the edge of the couch. Dangerous. What do you mean? What kind of bad things? Ryan struggled to find the words. She was part of something really bad, Lou. Something that hurt a lot of people, and when she had you, she couldn't keep you. She left you behind. She gave you up. Lucy's eyes welled up with tears, and Ryan cursed himself for bringing up such painful truths. He had never wanted to hurt her like this. He had never imagined how she would react to the revelation. She was just a kid, after all. I didn't want you to know this. I didn't want to tell you this. Ryan continued, his voice breaking. But you deserve to know, Lou. You deserve to know where you came from. Lucy stood up suddenly, her face flushed with confusion and hurt. Why are you telling me this now, Ryan? Why didn't Mom and Dad say anything? Ryan stood too, his hands held out in a gesture of helplessness. Because they didn't want to ruin everything. They wanted to protect you. But I think you should know the truth. I think you need to know what happened. Lucy took a few steps back, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to process his words. I don't want to know. I don't want to know any of this. She shouted, her voice cracking. Ryan's heart broke even more as he saw the confusion and fear in her eyes. This wasn't how he had imagined it would go. He had hoped, maybe naively, that they could talk about it and somehow make things better. But Lucy wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for the truth. I'm sorry, Lou, Ryan whispered, feeling utterly powerless. I didn't want to hurt you. I swear. I just didn't know how else to tell you. But Lucy was already retreating, her back turned to him as she ran up the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Ryan stood there, feeling the heavy weight of his words settling over him. He had shattered the delicate world she had known, and now he had no idea how to fix it. He had tried to protect her, tried to shield her from the darkness of her past, but the truth had torn through them both like a razor blade. Upstairs, Lucy slammed her door shut, burying herself in her bed, her face buried in her pillow as she cried. The sound of her sobs pierced through the silence of the house, and Ryan's heart shattered all over again. He couldn't take back what he had said. He couldn't undo the damage that had been done. The secrets that had haunted their family for so long had finally come to light, and the cost of that truth was far higher than he could have ever imagined. As Ryan stood in the dark hallway, feeling like a stranger in his own home, he realized that there was no going back. The truth had changed everything, and now it was up to him and his family to figure out how to rebuild the pieces of their shattered lives. But deep inside, Ryan knew that things would never be the same. The walls that had once held his family together had come crashing down, and the long-hidden secrets would leave scars that would never fully heal. The days that followed Lucy's confrontation with Ryan were filled with tension, silence, and an overwhelming sense of guilt that hung in the air. The truth had been revealed, and in its wake, everything seemed to shift. Ryan spent his days wandering the house, unable to focus on anything, his mind replaying the scene with Lucy over and over. Every sob, every word she had spoken in anger, it all echoed in his head, gnawing at him. He had tried to protect her, to shield her from the truth, but in doing so, he had ripped apart the very foundation of their relationship. Lucy didn't speak to him. She barely left her room, and when she did, it was only to eat, her face pale and her eyes downcast. She refused to make eye contact with Ryan, and whenever their paths crossed, there was a coldness between them that hadn't been there before. It was like a wall had been built, and Ryan could feel it growing taller each day, separating them further and further. Ryan tried to talk to her. He tried to apologize, to explain that he hadn't wanted to hurt her. But each time, she turned away. She would lock herself in her room, refusing to come out. It was like she couldn't even bear to be near him, and the weight of that rejection was suffocating. But it wasn't just Lucy who had changed. Ryan's parents, too, were different. His mother, Ellen, avoided talking about the situation altogether. She spent more time in her office, buried in work, and when she did interact with Ryan, it was only in the briefest of exchanges. She never mentioned the truth about Lucy's past again, as if pretending it hadn't been revealed would somehow undo the damage. Michael, on the other hand, had become more distant. Ryan could tell that his father was carrying his own weight of regret and guilt, but Michael wasn't the kind of man who wore his emotions on his sleeve. Instead, he would retreat into his study, spending hours working, only emerging when necessary. It was as if the weight of their family's secret had broken him too. The house felt empty now, the space between each family member filled with an unspoken tension that no one seemed willing to address. Ryan knew he had to do something, but he didn't know what. The damage had been done, and now all that was left was the fallout. One evening, as Ryan sat on the couch, staring blankly at the television, he heard the soft creak of footsteps behind him. He turned to see Ellen standing in the doorway, her face pale and wary. She had been avoiding him for days, and seeing her now, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite read, made his stomach tighten. "Ryan," she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet weight. "We need to talk." Ryan didn't answer immediately. He had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure what to say. He nodded, gesturing for her to sit. Ellen stepped forward, hesitated for a moment, and then sat down beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is hard. I know we've all been trying to pretend like everything is okay, but it's not. The truth is out, and it's tearing us apart." Ryan swallowed, feeling the lump in his throat grow. "I don't know what to do, Mom. Lucy, she won't talk to me. She won't even look at me, and I don't know how to fix it." But Ellen looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously. "You can't fix this, Ryan. Not right away. It's going to take time. But you have to be patient with her. She's in shock. She's confused, hurt, angry. And I don't blame her, Ba." Ryan nodded, his eyes filling with tears he hadn't realized were there. "I never wanted to hurt her. I just wanted her to know the truth. I thought she deserved to know. But now everything's broken." Ellen reached out, her hand gently resting on his arm. "I know, and I don't think anyone could have done anything differently. The truth was going to come out eventually. But Lucy, she needs time. She needs space to process what you told her, and you need to give her that." Ryan wiped his eyes, trying to steady himself. "But what if she never forgives me? What if we're never the same?" Ellen's face softened, and she sighed. "You have to believe that the bond you two share is stronger than this. She'll come around. It just might take a while. You have to be there for her when she's ready." Ryan didn't know if he believed her. It felt like too much had been shattered, too much had changed. He had always been the one Lucy turned to when things went wrong. He had always been her protector, her older brother. But now, it felt like he had failed her. He had exposed her to a truth that had turned her world upside down, and there was no undoing that. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if things would ever go back to the way they were. Would he ever hear Lucy's laughter again? Would they ever share the bond they once had? Or was everything forever broken, the rift between them too wide to bridge? As he lay there in the darkness, his phone buzzed beside him. It was a text from Lucy. "Ryan, I need to talk to you." His heart skipped a beat. After days of silence, Lucy was reaching out. He didn't know what to expect, but a part of him felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them to heal. He picked up the phone and quickly typed back, his hands trembling. "I'm here. Whenever you're ready." Lucy's reply came almost immediately. "Can you meet me in the garden?" Ryan's breath caught in his throat. The garden. It had always been their place. The place where they played as kids, where they shared secrets, where they sat and talked about everything and nothing. He knew that if Lucy was asking to meet there, it was because she needed something. Something more than just an apology. Without a second thought, Ryan slipped out of bed, grabbed his jacket, and made his way outside. The cold night air hit him as he stepped onto the porch, and he hurried down the path toward the garden. The moonlight bathed everything in a soft, silvery glow, and he could see Lucy standing near the old oak tree, her back to him. "Lucy," he called softly, unsure of what kind of reception he would get. She turned, her face pale but determined, her eyes red from crying. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him, her expression a mixture of sadness and something else, something he couldn't quite place. "Lucy, I'm sorry," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to hurt you. I thought you deserved to know the truth. I didn't know how to protect you from it." While Lucy took a deep breath, her gaze hardening as she looked at him. "You shouldn't have told me, Ryan. You shouldn't have ruined everything. I didn't need to know. I didn't ask for this." The words cut through him like a knife. He had expected anger, but hearing it from her so raw, so full of pain, made him want to crumble. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do, I thought. I thought you'd understand, but I was wrong." Lucy stepped forward, her eyes never leaving his. "You think I can just forget this? That everything's going to be okay? You think I can just pretend none of this ever happened?" Ryan's throat tightened and he shook his head. "No. But I'm here, Lou. I'm here for you. I'll be here for you, no matter what. Please. I know I can't fix this, but if you let me, I'll try to help you heal. I'll be there for you every step of the way." Lucy was silent for a long moment. Ryan could see the tears in her eyes, but she held them back, refusing to let them fall. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, almost broken. "I don't know, Ryan," she said. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Ryan's heart ached. "I understand. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I just want you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm here for you. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here, Lucy wiped her eyes, her hands trembling. "I don't know if I can ever be ready, Ryan." And with that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the garden, leaving Ryan standing alone in the cold, his heart shattering all over again. He knew it wasn't over yet, but as the night wrapped around him, he realized that the road to forgiveness and healing was long, and the distance between them might be too much to overcome. But for the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could be fixed. If they could find a way back to each other. The days that followed that night in the garden felt like a fragile truce. Ryan woke up every morning with the same knowing emptiness in his chest, uncertain of where he stood with Lucy, uncertain of where his family stood in the aftermath of the truth being exposed. He had hoped that, in time, things would begin to heal, but nothing had really changed. The silence between him and Lucy lingered like a thick fog, obscuring everything. Lucy, for her part, seemed to be trapped in her own confusion. She still didn't speak to him directly. She avoided the spaces they used to share. But there were moments, tiny moments, when Ryan caught glimpses of the sister he had once known. He saw it in the way she would linger by the door to the living room, as if trying to decide whether or not to come in. He saw it in the way her eyes would briefly meet his before she quickly turned away, as if she couldn't bear to confront him fully. It was small, but it was something. And for Ryan, it was a sign of hope, however faint. But hope wasn't always enough. He spent his days trying to keep busy, to bury himself in tasks to distract from the heavy ache in his chest. He helped his father around the house, though Michael, as usual, remained distant, only offering short words when necessary. It was clear that his father was still carrying the weight of guilt. Guilt about the lies, about the secrets they had kept hidden for so long. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that Michael, too, was searching for a way to fix things, but wasn't sure how. Ellen, too, seemed lost in her own thoughts. She would often stare off into the distance, lost in her own world, as though the truth had shattered something inside of her. She was quieter now, her smiles less frequent, and when she did speak, it was often about trivial things, avoiding the bigger issues that loomed over their family. But amidst all the distance, there were the moments when Ryan would catch Lucy in the corner of his eye, sitting on the porch, staring out at the garden. Sometimes, she would talk to him briefly, her voice quieter than usual, but there were still conversations. Small conversations about school, or about things they had both experienced as children, little pieces of the past that hadn't been tainted by the truth. These moments were fleeting, but Ryan held on to them with a desperate grasp, hoping they would be the foundation for a renewed bond. It was on one such evening, a few weeks after their confrontation, that Ryan found Lucy in the garden again. This time, she wasn't standing near the oak tree. She was sitting on the stone bench that had always been their favorite spot when they were kids. It was dusk, and the air was crisp, filled with the scent of the evening dew. The garden, once a place of laughter and shared secrets, now felt more like a battleground, the space between them charged with the remnants of their past. Ryan hesitated as he stood at the edge of the garden, not sure whether to approach or to leave her be. He could see that Lucy had her head down, her shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world had settled on them. It wasn't like her to be so still, so quiet. And for a moment, Ryan wondered if she was waiting for him, or if she was simply lost in her own thoughts. Finally, after a long moment of indecision, Ryan took a step forward, his feet crunching softly on the gravel path. Lucy didn't look up at him immediately, but he could see her breath catch as she heard him approaching. "Lucy," he said, his voice tentative. She didn't respond right away, and for a second, Ryan thought she might just get up and leave. But then, in a voice so quiet he almost missed it, she spoke. Why did you tell me?" she asked, her voice raw with emotion. It wasn't an accusation, it was a question. The question that had been hanging in the air between them for weeks. Ryan swallowed, trying to find the right words. He had rehearsed this conversation in his head countless times, but now that it was happening, the words seemed to fall short. "I thought you deserved to know," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I thought that if you knew, we could face it together. I never wanted to hurt you, Lucy. I never wanted to be the one to tear apart everything we had. But the truth, it just kept eating at me. I couldn't keep it from you anymore. I thought I was doing the right thing." Lucy looked up then, her eyes filled with unshed tears. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the weight of everything they had been through pressing heavily between them. Finally, Lucy wiped her eyes and looked down at her hands. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Ryan," she said, her voice breaking. "You changed everything. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't want to know. I was happy, you know? I was fine with the way things were." "I know," Ryan whispered. "I know you were. And I'm so sorry. I never wanted to make you feel like this." Lucy stood up suddenly, her face flushed with frustration. "You don't get it, Ryan. You don't get how everything's changed. I don't even know who I am anymore. I thought I had this life, this family, and now it feels like it was all a lie." Ryan stood frozen, the pain of her words cutting deep. It's not a lie, Lou. None of it was a lie. The love we shared, the bond we have, that's real. You're still my sister, no matter where you came from. That hasn't changed. You're not defined by your past. You're defined by who you are now. Who you've always been. And I love you. I always will. Lucy looked at him, her face softening just slightly. She was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his as if she were looking for something. Some proof that the words he said were true. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can ever look at things the same way again, Ryan. I don't know if I can ever forget the truth, Doc. Ryan's heart sank. He had known this moment would come, the moment when Lucy might not be able to forgive him, the moment when the distance between them might be too great to overcome. But he couldn't give up. He couldn't lose her. I don't expect you to forget, he said softly. I don't think I could either, but I want to rebuild what we had. I want to be here for you. And I know it's going to take time. But please, Lucy, don't shut me out. We'll find a way to get through this. Together. For the first time in weeks, Lucy met his gaze, and for a moment, Ryan saw something in her eyes. Something fragile but real. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a crack in the wall she had built around herself. I don't know if I'm ready, she said, her voice trembling. But maybe we can try. Maybe we can start over. Ryan stepped closer to her, feeling the weight of his own emotions pressing against him. I'll be here when you're ready. No matter how long it takes. I won't give up on us. Lucy nodded slowly, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small, tentative smile. And in that moment, Ryan realized that while the path ahead would be long and difficult, there was still hope. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more pain, more questions, more confusion. But they had taken the first step toward healing, toward rebuilding what had been broken. The past could never be erased, but maybe, just maybe, they could build something stronger from the pieces. As the night air grew colder and the stars twinkled above them, Ryan and Lucy stood together in the garden, the weight of the truth still heavy between them, but the possibility of a new beginning flickering faintly in the distance. It wasn't over, not yet. But for the first time in a long time, Ryan believed that, somehow, they would make it through. Together. Thanks for watching the video, subscribe, and like the video.